Aujourd'hui, c'est le grand jour. On parle de Thomas Pesquet. Il est une des personnalités favorites des Français, mais surtout quelqu'un pour qui l'anglais est un outil de survie.
What did you do?
Parce que dans l'espace, il n'y a pas de place pour les malentendus.
Houston, we have a problem.
Dans cette vidéo, on va analyser son anglais tout en apprenant ensemble. Et comme d'habitude, restez jusqu'à la fin pour découvrir sa note sur Thomas. So I felt a little bit inspired by all of this space talk in the media with the Artemis mission. And then I stumbled across this book at my local library. Thomas Pesquet's book of photographs that he's taken in space. Very nice, a bit of a chunky coffee table piece. And so I thought, you've asked me for it. Let's talk about Thomas Pesquet. Before we start, I want to let you know that you can also test yourself with the Thomas Pesquet English Challenge. You can download it for free from the description and see if your English is good enough to be an astronaut. So I found this interview of Thomas speaking English on France 24. Let's watch.
Thomas, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
So you're here because you have decided to put this fame to profit for an NGO called Aviation sans frontières in French, which means aviation without borders. First, can I ask you what this NGO does?
So what they're doing is really putting aviation to the service of humanitarian aid and relief all across the world, which means transporting all the cargo that you need, all the medical logistics, and also carrying people back and forth, bringing those children in need of an operation to the places when they can get it, and then bringing them back to where they belong. So it's really putting the aviation network at a good use, and it's giving wings to humanitarian effort all across the world.
Wow, well, I guess my first impression is that he has really nice fluency. We can see him speaking very, very naturally here. And I really like his pronunciation because I think what I really picked up on is some very nice roticity. So when I talk about roticity, I'm really talking about those R sounds. So that bunched up tongue, that classic English, but especially American sound of that can be very, very tricky for French speakers. We often like to replace those with the R sound. But I heard, him say really nice R sounds in words like cargo. I think he said something like carrying. And so I can really feel that he's using that front part of his mouth, front center part, to pronounce those R sounds. He mentioned that this NGO is giving wings to humanitarian efforts.
It's giving wings to humanitarian effort.
Which I think is a really nice sort of idiomatic way to describe what this NGO does. But of course, it all works because they are using aviation, so it's giving wings to humanitarian efforts. I love that. I don't know if maybe that's the motto of the NGO, but I think it just shows a comfortability with the language. A couple little things that just even now just made my ears prick up. I heard a lack of diphthongs in some areas. So diphthongs being these vowels that slide from one sound to another. So in the word aviation, that A sound is A, but I think I heard Thomas say aviation.
Putting aviation.
And there was another one, I think it must have been also, that O sound goes from O. I heard something like also.
And also.
Oh, let's keep going.
Why did you choose specifically to work with them?
Well, because when I was on the space station for a long time, you look at the Earth and it looks so fragile and so tiny, and then you really get into that habit of thinking, what could I do? How can I make the world a better place, so to speak? And then coming back on Earth, I was looking around and I decided finally to help them because I used to be a pilot before I became an astronaut. So it's really in my DNA. I understand how they work. I can relate to what they're doing. And maybe one day I have this dream that I could be on the field, flying those small Cessnas and going to places in the middle of the unknown and maybe getting some adventure out of it. So that's why I decided today to help them out the best I can.
Yeah, really, really nice fluency from Thomas. I heard here that he used the same preposition twice and it sounded a little bit off to me. First he said coming back on Earth.
Coming back on Earth.
This classic one. Again, guys, we just use to, coming back to Earth, because of course when we use go and come, we use to for a place. And another one he talked about doing work on the field.
Could be on the field.
In this case, we want to use in the field. Now, I think most people can probably hear that Thomas has very, very nice pronunciation. I feel like his English isn't just good, it's really functional. He needs to communicate, I guess, in international environments with people from all over the world in often high pressure situations. And this is something that I talk about all the time because your English doesn't live in a classroom. It lives with you when you're communicating with people from different countries, maybe you're working, maybe you're traveling internationally. And in those situations, being connected is really important. That's why I am really happy to talk to you today about cell-ci, the only eSIM you will ever need when traveling. That's because you install it just once and then you can simply choose a plan for your destination, instead of collecting different SIMs from different locations like I've been doing. You can see here that I've got, 5 different eSIMs plus all of these different physical SIM cards that I've been collecting. Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous. So I am really glad that I've discovered cell-ci. All you need to do is download the cell-ci app, pick your destination, for example, the United States. Pick your data plan. Don't forget to use my code bien entendu at checkout to get 15% off. Follow the instructions in the app, and then once you land, your connection will activate automatically. I love that it's an eSIM, so you don't need to wait in line at the airport to buy a physical SIM card. You avoid any of those sneaky roaming fees. It's happened to me. And if you're visiting several different countries, you can purchase regional or even global plans. cell-ci offers affordable data plans in over 200 destinations worldwide, including unlimited data options. So if you're traveling and you want to stay connected, whether it's for work, holidays, or to practice your English, download the cell-ci app from the link in the description or scan the code on the screen, and don't forget to use my code bien entendu to get 15% off your data plan.
It's something rather unusual, I believe, for astronauts to put their name, to sponsor NGOs, is it not?
It is quite uncommon. Not so much in Europe, though, but in the US, it's actually forbidden by the rules of the ISS, the International Space Station Program, for legal reasons. If you help one NGO, then all the other ones can complain that you're giving them a favor. So NASA doesn't want to open that box. So the standard rule for my NASA American colleagues is they cannot do it whatsoever. They cannot endorse anything. We have an exception here in Europe, and the European Space Agency allows us to choose one and pick one charity each. And today my choice is Aviation Sans Frontières.
He has a lot of nice little expressions or idioms that he picks out. Here he said, that NASA doesn't want to open that box.
NASA doesn't want to open that box.
I feel like it's correct. I feel like maybe there's a better... Is it open that can of worms? I don't know. I feel like maybe open that box is possible. I don't know, but people at home let me know if there are any... I know there are native speakers who watch this. NASA doesn't want to open that box. I don't know. What I liked here is I heard Thomas use the word cannot.
They cannot do it.
But he used it in a great way. He used it for emphasis. So I often say that most of the time you really should try to use those contractions. Just say can't. But I like the way that he really emphasized the word, and he said, my NASA colleagues cannot do that. He did talk about giving a favor.
You're giving them a favor.
Careful, here we would say doing a favor, to do a favor for somebody.
There is a yearly popularity contest here in France, which is run by IFOP, which is one of the main polling structures here in France. And you came out 5th this year, behind Kylian Mbappé, the famous footballer, and in front of Zinedine Zidane, which is quite remarkable and quite unusual for an astronaut. Why do you think this has happened?
Well, I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. One of them being that, back in the days, we've had flights before. I'm only the 10th Frenchman to fly into space, but Frenchman and woman. Nowadays, we have an internet connection on board the space station. We have social medias. We can take pictures. We have digital cameras, which we didn't used to have 10 years ago. So I think that certainly played a role.
What I love here is that Thomas said the first Frenchman.
The 10th Frenchman.
Love that. He did not say the first French. Remember, you are not a French. You are a French person. You're a Frenchman. You can say a French man, but Frenchman exists. French woman. French citizen. Right. Love that. Frenchman. Talking about the communications on board, I heard here a classic tiny little slip. Thomas mentioned that they have social medias on board.
Social medias.
Careful, media is a mass noun. We simply talk about social media. We have social media on board.
Some important newspapers, for example, Le Monde has recently wrote an article saying that there was a generation Pesquet in engineer schools in France. I mean, how does all that feel?
I don't know. I think well, first of all, it's a lot of responsibility, right? I have to be careful now what I do when I cross the street, because people are going to say, look, he's picking his nose or whatever. But no, I think it's great because I really try. There's some important topics that I keep talking about over and over again. Education, because I think it's the key to almost any problem in the world. Gender equity is also really hugely important for me. Protecting the environment, and then also European cooperation is a big one, because I think now that people have a tendency to not really trust the future, be scared of the future, and then fall back,
Something else that Thomas does is that he tends to tap his TH sounds, meaning that instead of pronouncing a and a th, we hear more of a t and d, which has a bit of a Dutch sound, I think, but it sounds very nice, much more natural than a s or a z sound. And here I heard him say the future. The future, be scared of the future. Very nice.
You are a tireless advocate of fighting climate change, aren't you?
Yeah.
Because you say from the ISS, you can actually see it. What's that mean? What do you actually see from the ISS?
So you can see, well, you don't see the climate changing in front of your eyes, but you really see the adverse effects of climate change. You see river pollutions, you see, on the sea, in the sea as well. You see ice melting, not over the course of a 6 months mission, but mission after mission, year after year. And you see air pollution. Some cities you can't even take a picture of because they're just covered in smog the entire day and the entire night. So you see all this. You see deforestation in South America. You can see it very clearly, almost with the naked eye, with just a small zoom on your camera.
So here, Thomas made a classic error. I feel like this is something that some of the highest level non-native English speakers still say. He talked about a 6 months mission.
Not over the course of a 6 months mission.
This is an adjective here, 6 month. We don't need it to be a plural. It's just a 6 month mission. And what I really picked out here is that even though Thomas has very much a more American sounding accent, he's using a lot of those strong R sounds, he still pronounces the word can't in a more, let's say, English way, right? He has a clear distinction between the way he says can, and instead of saying can't, he says can't.
You can't even take a picture of.
Look, I think it's totally normal, especially for non-natives, to sort of mix and match pronunciations. It's fine, unless you really, for some reason, want to focus on one specific accent. But I think perhaps he might actually just do it on purpose. I feel like the distinction between can and can't is, well, first of all, very important, but particularly important perhaps in space. Maybe it's like a conscious decision. Maybe he's decided to pronounce can and can't distinctly differently. Yeah, I wonder. So we just saw before, right? We saw that Thomas is using TH tapping, like t and d. But I can see here that he did go for it. He wanted to pronounce that TH sound in south. But what often happens, and it happened here with Thomas, is that, people, it's almost like they kind of get themselves ready to do the TH sound. And they might pronounce too many THs, right? I heard him say South America.
In South America.
2 TH sounds. I guess he was like, getting the tongue ready, you're like, I'm gonna do this, like I'm so ready, I'm like getting in. And then he just like went too hard, south. Yeah, totally fine, very understandable. But yeah, in fast conversation, it's always more difficult to pronounce those sounds. I don't know when I'm gonna stop saying poule instead of pull. Always talking about my chicken. Yeah, poule, pulle. I can hear it, can't say it.
We're seeing a lot of things change these days. As you know, NASA has decided to send astronauts back to the moon by 2024. Now, first question, do you think that's possible?
Everything is possible in space, but you need the effort, which is the engineering, the technology, and it's also the budget. Obviously, nothing comes for free. So I think if you put your mind into it, you could do it. But now there's also the question of, are we willing to accept as much risk as we did in the 60s and 70s? Because we've become, when I'm saying we, our societies, that we've become very adverse to risk adverse. They took huge, enormous risks back in the day. So everything worked out, but today would be completely unacceptable to lose, an astronaut or on a mission.
Okay. Here I think classic preposition, something I heard Thomas say was that if you put your mind into it.
I think if you put your mind into it,
Put your mind to something. If you put your mind to it, you can do anything. However, you can say put your back into it, meaning like use some physical effort. Put your back into it, put your mind to it. You can do anything you put your mind to. Another thing I heard here, I've already heard Thomas use the word adverse several times in this interview. He's used it very well. But here he wanted to say that now we've become very risk averse. But instead of using the word averse, he's used that word adverse again.
we've become very adverse to risk adverse.
Risk adverse. Risk averse, meaning that we want to avoid risks. But that is actually a really nice collocation, right? To be risk averse. What I can really sense with Thomas is that he has a really high level and he knows a lot of these maybe expressions, idioms, or nice collocations. Collocations which are specific words that we like to put together. For example, in French, we might have like tomber malade instead of like devenir malade, right? These two words sound nice together, tomber malade, but sometimes he just gets it a little bit off. It doesn't really matter because, especially native speakers, we can put the pieces back together. It still has that very descriptive effect. But yes, risk averse.
It's that tough.
It is that tough. And actually by working on it, because we're working on it with the European Space Agency in partnership with NASA, and I'm working on it when I'm not training, I only now realize how hard it was. And everything that went into the success that they've had in the 60s. It was really that hard.
Something that I thought was interesting here is the way that Thomas used the emphasis on a word. Here he said, it's not because we're not working on it. We're working on it.
Because we're working on it.
It's very strange to emphasize it here. What I would have said is, it's not that we're not working on it. We are working on it. I think that's sort of what he was trying to portray with that emphasis, but he said we're working on it. I also heard the pronunciation of the word success, but what I heard sounded more like success.
Success that they've had.
It sounded like two separate words. Now, because the word success, we emphasize that second syllable. The first syllable, it should be weak. I know that doesn't sound very successful. So instead of success, we just want success.
What's the next mission for you?
So for me, we have regular missions to the ISS because it's a laboratory and there's a lot of science and science experiments to be done. And it's going to be around for at least 10 more years until we've reached not even the end of our ideas in terms of science, but until we've done enough so that we can consider it successful. So we'll go back. I might go back again, long-term mission. And then after that, well, who knows? I could dream of setting the foot on the moon one day, and down the line, but that's in 20, 25 years. Maybe I'm too old already, but we'll see a big international human mission to Mars, and that's going to be the adventure of the century.
Here I heard Thomas talk about our ideas.
Of our ideas in terms of science.
Careful here. We have one word here. It should be pronounced as either idea or idea, right? With a much more English accent, idea. Or go for idea, not ID, right? Unfortunately, ID is your identification card, usually, right? That shows your age, your name, all those things. And Thomas did not hesitate to hit us with another great expression. He said, I could dream of one day setting foot on the moon.
I could dream of setting the foot on the moon one day.
Right, he did add an actual word. He said setting the foot on the moon. Let's get rid of that the. Totally fine, did not take away any of the impact of his statement, right? But I could dream of one day setting foot on the moon, right? We say setting foot on a boat, setting foot in Paris. very good.
Is that something you feel as well? There is this, you want to be up there? Or?
Well, you do want to be up there, but I think there's a change nowadays. The missions are long duration missions, 6 months on the ISS. Back in the days, it used to be 10, 15 days on the shuttle, and you're so busy that by the time you come back to the ground, you barely have any memories of your stay on orbit. Nowadays, we can take some more time on Sundays in the evening, take some more pictures. I try to take a lot of pictures. So by the time you're supposed to come back home, you're also happy to see your family and your friends that you haven't seen for 6 months.
This is, I think, at least the second time, maybe the third time I've heard Thomas say this. He talked about in the past, he said, back in the days.
Back in the days.
That's really a theme for him. He has such nice expressions, but there's often just one little extra thing and that's something I find so fascinating about expressions, which is that you can just add like one sound and it makes them sound a little bit strange. Here he said back in the days, we only need to say back in the day. And he talked about being on orbit.
Of your stay on orbit.
These prepositions, nobody likes them. We should be in orbit. So spending 6 months in orbit. So what did I think of Thomas Pesquet's English? He has lovely pronunciation. It sounds much more American. And yeah, I imagine that he probably worked very hard on that. And I can really see it. He is making an effort, or actually, it seems quite effortless, but he's producing the language in a totally different part of his mouth compared to his native French, for example. And I think that probably comes down to the fact that when you're in space, it is extremely important, imperative to make yourself understood very, very clearly. I definitely noticed a couple problems with maybe prepositions, but nothing that would, in my opinion, cause a misunderstanding. And lastly, I feel like Thomas really has such a nice repertoire of idioms and expressions, and they really just bring like so much color to his speech. So even though, yes, like they're notoriously difficult, he might add an article here or an extra S somewhere else, and they don't come out, say, perfectly, I still think that they really elevate his speech. So even if he's not using them perfectly, I love them. He should absolutely keep using them. My grade for Thomas Pesquet is an 18.5 out of 20. Let me know what you thought of Thomas Pesquet's English in the comments. Don't forget that you can test yourself with the Thomas Pesquet English Challenge Space Edition. The link is in the description. If you would like to learn English with other French celebrities, check out this playlist, and I'll see you next time. Bye!